Then why lie and say?
Your advertisement specified a cook of at least 25, someone mature, experienced.
The letter slipped from Ayanna's trembling hands as the stagecoach rattled along the dusty trail to Willow Creek, Wyoming territory. The year 1876 had not been kind to her people, and at 19, not the 25 she'd claimed in her correspondence, she was traveling west to work as a cook for a man she'd never met, a former cavalry officer who believed her to be a woman of suitable age and experience. "First time out west, miss." The elderly Lakota woman seated across from her offered a sympathetic smile. Ayanna nodded, gathering the letter and tucking it into her worn deer-hide satchel. "Yes, madam. A cook for a rancher." The woman's eyes held no judgment, only understanding. "Is it that obvious?" Ayanna smoothed her plain woven dress, wishing she'd had enough money for something more presentable. "You've got that hopeful, terrified look about you." The woman patted her hand. "I was the same 40 years ago. Left my family to marry a fur trader. Never regretted it a day." Ayanna smiled weakly. If only her situation were so simple. Her tribe's struggles with forced relocation and disease had left her with nothing except the promise of a job with Caleb Thorne, a man who wanted a mature woman of 25 to help him run his ranch, a man who might send her packing when he discovered her deception. The stagecoach hit a rut, jolting Ayanna from her thoughts. Outside the window, the landscape had transformed from rolling prairie to a series of gentle foothills dotted with pine. In the distance, purple mountains rose against an impossibly blue sky. "Willow Creek, 10 minutes," the driver called down. Ayanna's heart hammered against her ribs. Too late to turn back now. She'd sold everything she owned to make this journey. There was no home to return to, no position waiting. She straightened her shoulders. She would make this work. She had to. If you enjoy the story, hit that subscribe button right away. And if you don't, then just hit the like button anyway to keep more Wild West love stories coming. The stagecoach rattled into town, a single dusty street lined with false-fronted buildings. Men in wide-brimmed hats turned to watch as the coach rolled past. Ayanna felt exposed, as if they could somehow see through her careful facade to the frightened girl beneath. She clutched the small medicine pouch her grandmother had given her, the beads and quills cold against her palm. It was supposed to bring her courage, but all she felt was the chill of her own deceit. The coach finally lurched to a stop outside the Willow Creek Hotel. Ayanna remained frozen in her seat. "This is it, dear," the older woman said gently. "Your new beginning." Ayanna nodded, clutching her small satchel as she descended awkwardly from the coach. The brightness of the sun momentarily blinded her, and she blinked rapidly, trying to get her bearings. "Miss Ayanna," the deep voice startled her. She turned to find herself looking up a long way up at a man who seemed to be made entirely of hard angles and sun-browned skin. His eyes, startlingly gray beneath the shadow of his hat brim, studied her with unmistakable disappointment. "Mr. Thorne." Her voice came out as little more than a whisper. "Caleb Thorne." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with a premature silver at the temples. He was younger than his letters had led her to believe, perhaps 30. But the lines etched around his eyes spoke of a man who had seen his share of hardship. "I expected someone more substantial." Ayanna finished for him, her heart sinking. His brows drew together. "No, madam. I expected someone who looked like they'd been eating regular." He gestured to her slight frame. "Do they not feed folks back in the reservation anymore?" Relief washed over her, quickly followed by shame at her continued deception. "It's been a difficult year," she admitted truthfully. Something in his expression softened. "Well, there's plenty of food at the Lazy Tea. My housekeeper, Mrs. Gunderson, takes it as a personal insult if folks don't eat seconds." He reached for her satchel. "Is this all you've brought?" "Yes, I sold most of my belongings to pay for passage." He nodded, no judgment in his gaze. "Got a wagon outside. We'll get you settled at the ranch. Let you rest up. Your job can wait until you're ready." The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. Ayanna blinked back unexpected tears. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne." "Caleb," he corrected, leading her down the boardwalk toward a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 chestnut horses. "Might as well start using my given name if you're to be my head cook." Ayanna nodded, accepting his help into the wagon. As they pulled away from the town, She cast one last glance at the stagecoach that had brought her here. Her old life was behind her now. What lay ahead was a future built on deception, a thought that sat like lead in her stomach as the wagon rumbled toward her new home. The journey to the Lazy T took nearly 2 hours, during which Caleb pointed out landmarks and boundaries of his property. Ayanna tried to pay attention, but her mind kept circling back to the lie that stood between them. Eventually, they crested a hill, revealing a sprawling ranch nestled in a verdant valley. "There she is," Caleb said, a note of pride in his voice. "Not the biggest spread in Wyoming, but she's mine, free and clear." Ayanna took in the sight of the 2-story ranch house, the large barn, and various outbuildings. A stream ran along the eastern edge of the property, and cattle dotted the pasture and beyond. "It's beautiful," she said, and meant it. Caleb's mouth quirked in a small smile. "Glad you think so. Most folks expect something grander. They don't understand the beauty of the open land." "I've never wanted grand," Ayanna replied honestly. "Just safe." His eyes met hers briefly, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding that made her chest tight. As they approached the house, a stout woman emerged from the front door, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mrs. Gunderson," Caleb called. "Our new cook has arrived." The housekeeper beamed as Caleb helped Ayanna down from the wagon. "Welcome, Miss Ayanna. We've been looking forward to your arrival. You must be exhausted from your journey." "Thank you, Mrs. Gunderson." "I am rather tired," Ayanna admitted. "Well, I've prepared the guest room for you. Supper will be ready in an hour, but I can bring you up some tea while you freshen up." Caleb handed Ayanna's satchel to the housekeeper. "Show Miss Ayanna to her room, please. I need to check on a matter in the barn." With a tip of his hat, he strode away, leaving Ayanna to follow Mrs. Gunderson into the house. Inside, Ayanna was surprised by the comfortable furnishings and tasteful decorations. She had expected something more rustic, but the home spoke of care and attention. Mr. Thorne's mother had a hand in the decorating before she passed, Mrs. Gunderson explained, leading Ayanna up a wide staircase. "He's kept everything just as she left it." "How long ago did she die?" Ayanna asked. 5 years now. His father followed just last year. That's when Mr. Thorne decided it was time to find a good cook. The housekeeper opened a door, revealing a pleasant bedroom with a 4-poster bed and embroidered blankets. "Here you are. The washroom is down the hall. I'll bring up that tea." Left alone, Ayanna sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the events of the day. Caleb Thorne was not what she had expected. Kinder, certainly, more handsome, undeniably. And now she felt even worse about her deception. She unpacked her meager belongings, hanging her second dress in the wardrobe and placing her few personal items on the dresser. Among them was a small quillwork box containing a lock of her mother's hair, a constant reminder of the family she had left behind. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm doing the best I can." A knock at the door announced Mrs. Gunderson's return with tea. The housekeeper set the tray on a small table by the window. "Will you be coming down for supper, or shall I bring a tray up?" Ayanna squared her shoulders. "I'll come down. I should start learning my way around if this is to be my home." Mrs. Gunderson nodded approvingly. "Mr. Thorne will appreciate that. He's a good man, Miss Ayanna. Lost too much, too young, but a good man all the same." "How did he come to own this ranch?" Ayanna asked, sipping the strong, sweet tea. "Built it from nothing, he did. Left the army at 16, with just the clothes on his back and a knack for handling cattle. Worked for other ranchers until he saved enough to buy his first parcel of land. Added to it year by year, pride colored the housekeeper's voice. Many a local girl had her eye on him, but he kept to himself. Said if he was going to marry, he wanted someone who chose him for himself, not his land." Guilt twisted in Ayanna's stomach. She had chosen Caleb for his stability, for the security he offered, not for himself. "I'll see you at supper then," Mrs. Gunderson said, leaving Ayanna alone with her thoughts. Supper was a quiet affair, with Caleb asking polite questions about her journey west. Ayanna answered carefully, avoiding details that might reveal her true age. As they ate Mrs. Gunderson's hearty beef stew, she found herself studying her new employer surreptitiously. His hands were calloused from hard work, his face weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes held intelligence, and when he occasionally smiled, a warmth that transformed his severe features. "I should warn you," he said as they finished their meal. I've arranged for Reverend Parker to visit tomorrow. Folks in town are curious about our new cook, and I thought it best to make introductions gradually. Ayanna nodded, her throat suddenly dry. More people to deceive. Of course, no need to look so worried, Caleb said, mistaking her anxiety. The Reverend's wife is a kind woman. She'll help you find your footing in the community. That's very thoughtful of you. He shrugged, uncomfortable with her gratitude. It's nothing. Just want you to feel at home here. After dinner, they sat on the front porch, watching as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The air grew cool, and Ayanna wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders. Beautiful, isn't it? Caleb asked quietly. Yes, I've never seen anything like it. Worth coming all this way? Ayanna turned to find him watching her, his expression unreadable in the gathering darkness. I think so, she answered honestly. Though it's too soon to tell. He nodded, accepting her candor. Fair enough. He rose from his chair. I'll bid you good night, Miss Ayanna. Morning comes early on a ranch. Good night, Mr. Thorne. Caleb, she corrected herself. As he disappeared into the house, Ayanna remained on the porch, listening to the unfamiliar symphony of night sounds. Crickets chirped, an owl hooted in the distance, and somewhere a coyote yipped, so different from the tribal song she'd known all her life. She wondered what her brother was doing, if he missed her as much as she missed him. Kola had been against her plan from the start. It's dishonest, Ayanna, he'd argued. And what happens when this rancher discovers the truth? He won't, she'd insisted. What difference does 6 years make? I can cook as well at 19 as I could at 25. But now, faced with the reality of Caleb Thorne, his honesty, his decency, the difference seemed vast indeed. Morning did come early, as Caleb had warned. Ayanna woke to the sounds of activity outside her window. Peering out, she saw ranch hands moving about the yard, Caleb among them, giving directions and checking equipment. She dressed quickly in her better dress, a pale blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She pinned her hair in a simple style, appropriate for a woman of supposed maturity, and made her way downstairs. Good morning, Miss Ayanna. Mrs. Gunderson greeted her cheerfully. Sleep well? Very well, thank you. Mr. Thorne's already had his breakfast and is seeing to the day's work. Said to tell you Reverend Parker and his wife will be here for lunch at noon. Ayanna glanced at the mantel clock. It was just past 7. Is there anything I can do to help prepare? The housekeeper looked surprised, then pleased. Most ladies wouldn't offer, but if you're willing, I could use help with the baking. For the next several hours, Ayanna worked alongside Mrs. Gunderson in the kitchen, learning the quirks of the wood-burning stove and mastering the housekeeper's recipe for apple pie. The familiar tasks calmed her nerves, reminding her of days spent in her mother's kitchen, grinding corn and preparing buffalo jerky. When Caleb returned to the house shortly before noon, he stopped in the doorway of the kitchen, surprise evident on his face. Miss Ayanna, I didn't expect to find you here. Ayanna looked up from where she was crimping the edge of a pie crust. I hope you don't mind. Mrs. Gunderson was kind enough to show me around your kitchen. Our kitchen, he corrected. Then to Mrs. Gunderson. She any good? The housekeeper nodded approvingly. Got a natural touch, Mr. Thorne. Made that pie all on her own? She did. Something like satisfaction crossed Caleb's face. Good. A woman who's not afraid of work will do well here. He cleared his throat. The Parkers have just turned into the drive. I'll clean up and greet them. After he left, Mrs. Gunderson chuckled. You've impressed him, Miss Ayanna. Not an easy thing to do. I only made a pie, Ayanna protested, but pleasure warmed her at the thought of Caleb's approval. Lunch with the Parkers proved less daunting than Ayanna had feared. Reverend Parker was a jovial man in his 52nd, and his wife Abigail immediately took Ayanna under her wing. It's so brave what you've done, Mrs. Parker said as they sat in the parlor after the meal, coming all this way to cook for a stranger. Not so uncommon these days, Reverend Parker pointed out. Half the women in the territory came as mail-order workers. Still brave, his wife insisted. Now we must discuss your employment. You'll be here for a long time, I hope. Caleb, who had been quietly listening, looked to Ayanna. I thought we might wait a few weeks. Give Miss Ayanna time to adjust. Ayanna felt a rush of gratitude. That's very considerate. Mrs. Parker nodded approvingly. Most men would be in a hurry. "It speaks well of you, Mr. Thorne." She turned back to Ayanna. "But we should still plan. The ladies of my sewing circle would be delighted to help with a new apron for you." "That's very kind, but I couldn't impose." "Nonsense. It's the highlight of our year to welcome a new resident to the community." Mrs. Parker's enthusiasm brooked no argument. "I'll bring them to call next week." As the afternoon progressed, Ayanna found herself warming to the Parkers. They were genuinely kind people, interested in her comfort and well-being. For the first time since arriving, she felt that perhaps she could find a place in this community, if only her deception didn't destroy everything. After the Parkers departed, Caleb suggested a tour of the ranch. "If you're not too tired," he added. "I'd like that very much," Ayanna replied. He helped her into the wagon, and they set off across the property. Caleb pointed out the boundaries of his land, the best grazing areas, the spring that never ran dry, even in the hottest summers. He spoke with quiet pride of what he'd built, and Ayanna listened, increasingly impressed by his accomplishments. "What made you decide to come west?" she asked as they paused atop a rise overlooking the valley. Caleb was silent for a long moment. "Necessity at first. My father was a drunk who couldn't hold a job. By the time I was 16, I was tired of watching my mother go hungry. I'd read about the opportunities out west, so I joined the army and never looked back." "You were very young to be on your own." He shrugged. "No younger than many. What about you? What made a woman of the plains decide to become a rancher's cook?" Ayanna looked away, composing her answer carefully. "After the sickness took my parents, there weren't many options. I could marry a warrior, become a healer, or work for an outsider," he finished. "None seemed particularly appealing until I read your advertisement." This much, at least, was true. "And now, having seen what you're getting into?" She met his gaze squarely. "I think I made the right choice." Something shifted in his eyes, a warming that made her breath catch. "I hope you still think so in a year's time." The following weeks fell into a pattern. Ayanna spent her mornings learning the workings of the ranch house from Mrs. Gunderson, her afternoons exploring the property or receiving visitors from town, and her evenings on the porch with Caleb, watching the sunset and talking. She learned that he had a dry sense of humor, a passion for literature that surprised her, and a deep knowledge of the land and its rhythms. He in turn discovered her love of traditional stories, her skill with numbers, and her determination to be useful. "Never met a woman who could balance account books like you," he remarked one evening as she completed the ranch's monthly ledgers. "Where did you learn that?" "My father was a keeper of our tribe's history and finances," she replied, careful not to mention that she'd been helping him since she was 12. "He taught me." Caleb nodded, impressed. Useful skill on a ranch. Most years, the difference between profit and loss comes down to careful accounting. As promised, Mrs. Parker brought the sewing circle to call. 6 women ranging in age from 20 to 70 descended on the ranch house, armed with fabric samples and determined opinions on Ayanna's new work attire. "Nothing too elaborate," Ayanna protested as they discussed designs. "Something practical that I could wear every day." Mrs. Henderson, the oldest of the group, clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "A cook's apron should be special, child." "Perhaps something in between," suggested young Mrs. Wilson, recently arrived from St. Louis. Elegant, but not impractical. They eventually settled on a design that satisfied everyone. As they worked, they shared stories of their own arrivals in the territory, their jobs, their adjustments to frontier life. Ayanna listened eagerly, gathering wisdom she desperately needed. "The first year's the hardest," Mrs. Parker confided. "Everything's strange, and you miss home something fierce. But it gets better." "What if?" Ayanna hesitated, then pushed forward. "What if you've made a mistake, done something your employer might not forgive?" The women exchanged glances. "Men out here are more forgiving than you might think," Mrs. Henderson said carefully. "They understand hardship and necessity in ways Eastern men don't. But honesty matters," added Mrs. Wilson. "Relationships out here need trust to survive." The words stayed with Ayanna long after the women departed. That night, as she and Caleb sat on the porch, she gathered her courage. "Caleb, there's something I need to tell you." He turned to her, his expression open. "What is it?" The words stuck in her throat. She looked at him, at this man who had shown her nothing but kindness. who was offering her a future, a home, and couldn't bear to see disappointment replace the warmth in his eyes. I'm worried about being a good cook," she said instead, hating herself for her cowardice. "I have so much to learn about ranch life." His face softened. "You're doing fine, Ayanna. Better than fine." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it sent a strange flutter through her chest. Most city people would be complaining by now about the dust, the isolation, the work. "I'm not most people." "No," he agreed, his eyes holding hers. "You certainly are not. If you like Wild West love stories or Wild West stories, drop a bunch of 1 second, and your place in the comments for the Wild West Love channel. Tell me where you're listening from so I don't feel so alone out here." 2 days later, disaster struck. A messenger on horseback arrived from the reservation, bearing news that Ayanna's brother, Kola, had fallen seriously ill with pneumonia after a hunting trip gone wrong. His master had written to inform Ayanna that her brother was asking for her. "I have to go," she told Caleb, her hands trembling as she held the short message. "He's all the family I have left." Caleb didn't hesitate. "Of course you must go. I'll take you to town to catch tomorrow's eastbound stage. Your job can wait. Family comes first, Ayanna." His understanding only deepened her guilt. "I don't know how long I'll be gone." "As long as it takes," he said firmly. "Your brother needs you." The journey back was agonizing in its slowness. For 3 days, Ayanna sat on jolting stagecoaches and swaying trains, imagining the worst. When she finally reached the tribal lands and the makeshift lodge where Kola was being cared for, she was exhausted and frantic. To her immense relief, she found her brother recovering. The pneumonia had been severe, but the crisis had passed, and Kola was on the mend. "You didn't need to come all this way," he chided as she sat by his bedside. "I wasn't dying. I would never have forgiven myself if something had happened and I wasn't here," Ayanna replied, squeezing his hand. Over the next few days, as Kola grew stronger, Ayanna told him about Willow Creek, about the ranch, about Caleb. She found herself smiling as she described the land, the people, the life she was beginning to envision for herself. "You care for him," Kola observed. "This rancher of yours." Ayanna couldn't deny it. "Yes, he's a good man, Kola. Kind, intelligent, hard-working. And what will this good man say when he learns you've lied about your age?" She looked away. "I tried to tell him before I left. I couldn't do it. Ayanna." Kola's voice was gentle but firm. "You cannot build a life on deception. What if he sends me away? Where would I go? What would I do? If he's the man you describe, he won't send you away. He might be angry, hurt even, but a man who values you." "He doesn't value me like that," Ayanna interrupted. "We barely know each other." Kola raised an eyebrow. "Is that why you traveled 1,000 miles when you thought I was dying? Because you barely know me?" Ayanna had no answer for that. By the time Kola was well enough for her to leave, nearly 3 weeks had passed. She had sent Caleb a telegram informing him of her brother's recovery and her planned return, but had received no response. The silence worried her. Had he changed his mind, decided he didn't want to cook after all? The journey back to Willow Creek was even more anxiety-filled than the journey to the reservation had been. By the time the stagecoach rolled into Willow Creek, Ayanna was a bundle of nerves. To her surprise, Caleb was waiting for her, his tall figure unmistakable even from a distance. As she descended from the coach, he strode forward, concern etched on his features. "Are you all right? You look exhausted." The simple question, his immediate concern for her welfare, rather than any mention of the delay or inconvenience, undid her. Tears filled her eyes. "I'm fine. Kola is recovering. I'm sorry to have been gone so long. No matter. You're here now." He took her arm and offered it. "The wagon's this way. Mrs. Gunderson has supper waiting." The normalcy of his greeting, as if she'd been gone hours rather than weeks, steadied her. Perhaps nothing had changed. Perhaps she could still find the courage to tell him the truth. But as the days passed and they fell back into their routine, the opportunity never seemed right. Caleb was busy with ranch work, preparing for the coming winter. Ayana threw herself into helping, learning to preserve fruits and vegetables from the garden, assisting Mrs. Gunderson with canning and pickling. The women of the sewing circle returned for her new work apron fitting, exclaiming over how the simple design suited her slender frame. A new contract was set for her to be on the ranch indefinitely, just 6 weeks away. "Is that agreeable to you?" Caleb asked, after Reverend Parker departed with the news. "If you need more time." "No," Ayana said quickly. "That's fine." She knew she couldn't allow her deception to continue indefinitely. She would tell him, she resolved, before signing the new contract. She would find the right moment and tell him everything. But the right moment proved elusive. September slipped into October, and suddenly the contract signing was just a week away. Ayana lay awake at night, rehearsing what she would say, how she would explain. Each scenario ended with Caleb turning from her in disgust, ordering her to leave his home, his life. And somewhere along the way, the thought of losing him had become unbearable. It was Mrs. Gunderson who finally forced her hand. The housekeeper came to her room 3 days before the contract signing, a letter in her hand. "This came for you while you were back at the reservation," she said. "I forgot to give it to you with all the commotion of your return." Ayana took the envelope, recognizing her brother's familiar markings. She thanked Mrs. Gunderson and waited until the door closed before opening it. Inside was a brief note from Kola, written before she'd even reached the village. "My dearest sister, by the time you receive this, I hope you will have found the courage to tell Mr. Thorne the truth. Remember what grandmother always said, a clear conscience makes the softest pillow. I want you to be happy, Ayana. Truly happy. And that can only come with honesty. Your loving brother, Kola." Ayana pressed the letter to her chest, tears stinging her eyes. Kola was right. She had to tell Caleb, and it had to be now, before the contract preparations advanced any further. She found him in the barn, checking harnesses for the wagon that would take them to town for supplies the next day. "Caleb," her voice sounded small in the cavernous space. "May I speak with you?" He looked up, his expression softening at the sight of her. "Of course. Is something wrong?" Ayana twisted her hands together. "Not wrong, exactly, but there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you from the beginning." Caleb set down the harness he was examining and gave her his full attention. "Go on." She took a deep breath. "I haven't been entirely truthful with you. In my letters, I told you I was 25 years old. That's not true." His brows drew together. "You're older, Ayana? That doesn't matter to me. Number." She forced herself to meet his gaze. "I'm younger. I'm 19, Caleb. I'll be 20 in December. Hey, friend, go grab a full glass of water. People often forget to drink enough, and that's actually a pretty serious issue for you." For a long moment, Caleb said nothing. His face was unreadable. "Then why lie about your age? Your advertisement specified a cook of at least 25, someone mature, experienced." She swallowed hard. "I needed to leave the reservation after my parents died. The debts. There was nothing left. I sold everything to secure Kola's future and pay for my journey here. I couldn't afford to be turned away." Caleb ran a hand through his hair. "So you lied?" "Yes." Ayana blinked back tears. "I'm sorry. I've wanted to tell you since I arrived, but I was afraid. Afraid you'd send me away. Afraid of having nowhere to go. And then, later, afraid of losing." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Losing what?" he prompted, his voice gentler than she deserved. "This, the ranch, Mrs. Gunderson, the life I was beginning to imagine." She hesitated, then added softly, "You." Caleb studied her for a long moment. 6 years is a big difference, Ayana. "I know. Not in the way you're thinking." He stepped closer. "I'm not angry that you're younger. I'm concerned that you felt you needed to lie, that you've been carrying this secret, afraid to tell me the truth." Hope flickered in her chest. "You're not sending me away? Is that what you thought would happen?" He looked genuinely surprised. "Ayana, I've come to care for you these past months. Your age doesn't change who you are, your intelligence, your determination, your kindness." "But I deceived you," she whispered. "Yes, you did." His tone was serious but not harsh. "And we'll need to talk about that. Trust matters in a relationship, Ayana. I need to know you'll be honest with me, even when it's difficult." A relationship. He still wanted her to stay. Relief made her knees weak. I promise, she said fervently. No more lies, Caleb. Not ever. He nodded, accepting her word. Is there anything else I should know? Any other secrets? Ayanna shook her head. Just my age. Then I believe we still have a contract to prepare for. He offered his hand. And after a moment's hesitation, she took it. Unless you've changed your mind. No, she said quickly. If you'll still have me, I want to be your cook. His fingers tightened around hers. Age is just a number, Ayanna. It doesn't count for much out here. What matters are the moments we choose to spend together, the life we build. He paused, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. I've grown rather fond of our evenings on the porch. The simple admission warmed her more than any grand declaration might have. So have I. They walked back to the house hand in hand, the weight of deception lifted from Ayanna's shoulders. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, the silence between them was comfortable, companionable. Why 25? Caleb asked suddenly. Why not say you were 21 or 22? Ayanna smiled ruefully. Your advertisement was specific. Seeking a mature cook of at least 25 years, preferably with experience in large households. I was trying to avoid giggly young girls with romantic notions about frontier life. I needed a practical partner. And that's not me? Ayanna challenged, raising an eyebrow. You're the most practical 19-year-old I've ever met, he conceded. Too practical sometimes. I haven't seen you do anything just for the joy of it since you arrived. The observation startled her. When had she last done anything purely for pleasure? Before her parents' deaths, certainly. Perhaps even before that, when responsibility for helping the family make ends meet had fallen increasingly on her young shoulders. I don't know how, she admitted softly. Caleb rose from his chair. Come with me. Curious, Ayanna followed him down the porch steps and across the yard to the corral where the horses were kept. He opened the gate and led her inside where he whistled softly. A beautiful Palomino mare trotted over. This is Sunny, Caleb said, stroking the horse's nose. She's gentle as they come. I thought she might be yours if you wanted to learn to ride. Ayanna stared at the mare in wonder. Mine? But I don't know how to ride. I'll teach you. He guided her hand to the horse's velvety muzzle. Every ranch hand should know how to handle a horse. The mare nuzzled Ayanna's palm, warm breath tickling her skin. Something tight in her chest loosened. When can we start? Caleb's smile lit his eyes. Tomorrow, if you like. I'd like that very much. The next morning, Caleb kept his promise. After breakfast, he led Ayanna to the corral where Sunny waited, already saddled. We'll start slow, he assured her, showing her how to approach the horse, how to hold the reins, how to mount safely. Ayanna felt awkward and ungainly at first, perched atop the mare. But Caleb's patient instruction gradually eased her nervousness. By midday, she was walking Sunny around the corral unassisted, a sense of accomplishment warming her. You're a natural, Caleb called from where he leaned against the fence. I doubt that, Ayanna laughed. But I'm enjoying it. That's what matters. He opened the gate, ready to try outside the corral. For the next hour, they rode slowly around the ranch yard. Caleb on his stallion River, Ayanna on Sunny. The rhythmic movement of the horse beneath her was soothing, and the autumn sun warm on her back. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. Thank you, she said as they returned the horses to the corral. I didn't realize how much I needed this. Caleb helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist. There's more to life than work, Ayanna. Even on a ranch, his closeness made her breath catch. They stood there for a long moment, his hands on her waist, her face tilted up to his. Then, slowly, he bent his head and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning. Ayanna hesitated only a moment before responding, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. When they finally parted, both were breathing faster. I've been wanting to do that for weeks, Caleb admitted, his voice rough. Why didn't you? Didn't seem proper before you were officially employed. A faint smile touched his lips. I'm trying to be a gentleman. Ayanna laughed softly. Very admirable. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch sending shivers down her spine. 2 more days, he murmured. Then you'll be my official head cook. The words held promise and certainty. Ayanna leaned into his touch, no longer afraid of the future or of her past. If you're watching on television, Don't hesitate, grab your phone and hit subscribe to my channel so you'll never miss out on our amazing characters. The day to sign the contract dawned clear and crisp. The aspens in the hills turned to gold by autumn. In the guest room that had been hers for the past months, Ayanna sat still as Mrs. Parker and the ladies of the sewing circle helped her get ready. The ivory silk gown was more beautiful than she had imagined. Simple yet elegant, with tiny pearl buttons down the back, and delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. "You look lovely, my dear Mrs." Henderson said, arranging Ayanna's dark curls in a sophisticated style, like a proper young woman of means. Young. The word no longer carried the weight of deception. Caleb knew the truth and had accepted her with all her flaws and fears. "Are you nervous, Mrs.?" Parker asked, pinning a spray of late-blooming wildflowers to Ayanna's hair. "A little," Ayanna admitted, "but mostly excited." The older woman smiled knowingly. "As it should be. Now, I believe we've kept your employer waiting long enough." Downstairs, the parlor had been transformed. Flowers adorned every surface, and chairs had been arranged. At the far end stood Reverend Parker, Bible in hand, and beside him, Caleb. He had traded his usual ranch clothes for a well-cut suit, his dark hair neatly combed. But it was his expression as Ayanna entered the room that took her breath away, wonder, admiration, and something deeper, something that made her heart race. The ceremony passed in a blur. Ayanna was aware of the Reverend's sonorous voice, of Caleb's hand warm and steady around hers, of the simple gold band he slipped onto her finger. And then the Reverend was pronouncing them man and wife, and Caleb was kissing her, a brief, tender kiss that held the promise of many more to come. The small reception that followed was filled with laughter and well wishes. The entire community had turned out to celebrate, bringing gifts and dishes to share. As the sun began to set, Caleb found Ayanna by the refreshment table. "Ready to escape?" he murmured in her ear. She nodded, suddenly shy. They had discussed this. Mrs. Gunderson would stay with her sister in town tonight, giving the newlyweds privacy for their first night as husband and wife. They said their goodbyes, accepting final congratulations and ribald advice from some of the ranch hands. Then, at last, they were alone in the house that was now truly Ayanna's home. Caleb took her hand, leading her up the stairs, not to the guest room she had occupied, but to the master bedroom at the end of the hall. "I had Mrs. Gunderson move your things," he explained, opening the door. The room was large and comfortable, dominated by a massive four-poster bed. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the polished furniture. "It's beautiful," Ayanna said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "My mother decorated it," Caleb told her, "but it's yours now, to change as you wish." "I wouldn't change a thing," she meant it. The room, like the rest of the house, felt right, felt like home in a way no place had since her parents' death. Caleb moved to stand behind her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Are you happy, Ayanna?" he asked quietly. She turned to face him, reaching up to touch his cheek. "Yes, happier than I ever expected to be." His eyes darkened. "I want to make you happy, every day for the rest of our lives."